Now, where do you see nuclear energy fitting into that mix? We've seen countries like Germany who have completely abandoned all nuclear power. Post Fukushima, of course, China had a total review of all their plants, but it looks like they're going to be forging ahead, perhaps slightly more carefully. Where do you see it fitting in to the global mix as well as here in China?
Well, again, this is a very flux debate right now, and it would have to do with whether societies continue to accept or not nuclear power. My sense is that we're probably going to start moving away from it. There are countries that are terribly dependent on nuclear power, mostly in Europe. But for those countries that are not largely dependent, I think that the thinking is to start moving away from it, to start taking, if you like, the share of nuclear power through bringing into that mix, again, gas and renewables.
Now, going back to more global issues in terms of trade talks, we've had the Doha round. There's been calls for perhaps a China round. What do you make of that?
It's hard to understand what exactly will be the content of a China round. But it's true that today, sort of the elephant in the room for any deal is the competitiveness of any country, developed or developing, at any level vis-a-vis China. So the US and the EU have been requesting from China to give concessions, particularly on market access in industrial products and a number of other issues that are still difficult for China to consider. China's option is to play that multilateral game, or alternatively start developing regional trade agreements and bilateral trade agreements with significant economic partners and compete through them in the same way that now the US and the EU and other countries are doing.
Now, the WTO, of course, was set up by more Western powers. China has only been involved for the last 10 or so years. How difficult is it trying to play perhaps by Western established rules?
Well, I think you're asking the question that really matters at this time, which is that the system of international trade and the international economic system that we have was set up in the post-war, as you say. And when China, after liberalization, comes into that system, in the case of the WTO, it has to go through a process of accession, where it has to give in to the terms that are imposed on China. It is a win-win situation. It is used incredibly wisely by the Chinese leadership to lock in reforms at the domestic level and to promote reforms at the domestic level that otherwise could have been very difficult. But right now, that's exactly the tension that is being played. Those that generated those rules don't feel comfortable with the rules anymore. And China, having acceded to the system on terms that it did not define, doesn't feel either fully comfortable with the rules.